Welcome to the Community Design Center's final lecture luncheon of the 18th annual ReShaping Rochester series. What a pleasure it is to see all of you gathered here this afternoon. My name is Karen Nozick, and I'm the Executive Director of the Community Design Center of Rochester. I am so glad that all of you decided to join me for today's wonderful event, Public Health and the Public Realm, which is one of my very favorite topics. The theme of this spring series has been Then and Now, and although this is the 18th season of our lecture series, this is the Community Design Center's 20th anniversary year. The Community Design Center of Rochester was founded in 2003, and this year we celebrate 2 decades of service to the greater Rochester region. The Design Center promotes the creation of vibrant, equitable, and resilient communities by marshaling the resources of the design community and by engaging, educating, and empowering stakeholders. Each year through our lecture series, the CDCR aims to open dialogue around neighborhood planning, design strategies, and issues of equity that contribute to the revitalization of our region. Many thanks go to the Design Center's Board of Directors for their continuing commitment, guidance, and support. Please give a round of applause to this hardworking bunch, many of whom are here today. President Bill Price, past President Monica McCullough, Treasurer Stephanie Annunziata, Secretary Vanessa Villeneuve, Howard Decker, Jean Dupre, Eugenio Marlin, Michael Pratico, Pamela Reese-Smith, Miriam Yakub, and Tanya Swalen. We appreciate the support of individuals and businesses in our community. Our circle of friends is made up of people who have donated $500 or more to our organization. A big thank you goes out to everyone on this list. We depend on support from the community to keep our work going, and we could not do it without you. A big thank you goes to this year's gold sponsor, ESL Federal Credit Union. ESL's presence in our community is felt far and wide, and their continuing support makes it possible for the Design Center to bring these presentations to Rochester. Today, I am pleased to welcome to the stage Eric Van Duzen, Manager, Community Impact at ESL, to say just a few words.
Thank you, Karen. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric Van Duzen. I'm the Manager of Community Impact at ESL. And it is my pleasure to be here with you today for the culmination of the Community Design Center's 18th ReShaping Rochester presentation series. This series and the work of the Design Center are critical for us at ESL and the community as a whole to keep the issues, opportunities, and solutions facing Rochester and the surrounding region top of mind as we seek to envision and build an inclusive, accessible, and equitable community for all. We are not community planners or designers at ESL, but we are learners, and we seek to partner with, work with, and learn from the experts in our community doing the critical work that moves us forward. ESL has been a longtime supporter of the Design Center and this presentation series. This is because we believe in doing our part to help build strong neighborhoods that are connected and affordable, and the Design Center is at the forefront of educating and informing us on how to do that in a way that makes our community stronger and more resilient. Thank you to Karen and the Board of Directors for continuing to be the community's go-to resource for designing a greater Rochester that is inclusive and accessible for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. And thanks to everyone at ESL. You're always so wonderful to work with. We would like to recognize and thank the New York State Council on the Arts, who has made our work possible through their generous support. A special thank you today goes to our exclusive media sponsor, WXXI, for your continuing support. Thank you to the Courtyard by Marriott, to Hinge Neighbors, to the City of Rochester, Development Advisors, Vanguard Engineering, Costanza Enterprises, Hevron and Company, CJS Architects, Home Leasing, the U of R, and the other local businesses and organizations who continue to support our work. We really couldn't do it without you. Thank you to AIA and APA Rochester for offering professional development credits for licensed and certified professionals. And now it is my pleasure to turn us towards the heart of today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great excitement that we welcome to the stage the 71st Mayor of Rochester, Malik Evans. Mayor Evans has been a tireless advocate for our city, dedicated to uplifting our communities and making a lasting impact on the lives of its residents. He is a true embodiment of leadership and public service. With a deep-rooted commitment to our city's progress, he has shown unwavering dedication and a strong vision for a bright future. Mayor Evans understands the power of collaboration and the importance of community engagement. He actively listens to the concerns and aspirations of citizens, ensuring that their voices are heard and reflected in the decisions that shape our city's trajectory. With a spirit of inclusivity, Mayor Evans has embraced diversity, recognizing it as a driving force behind our city's strength and resilience. Under Mayor Evans' leadership, our city is witnessing transformative initiatives that are propelling us forward. His presence here today is a testament to his deep love for our city and his unwavering dedication to its betterment. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to our esteemed mayor, Malik Evans.
Thank you, Karen, for that very nice introduction. I want to thank you all for being here today. I feel a little old though, because I remember when the Design Center was just founded 20 years ago. So that tells you how fast 20 years go. I often remind my kids that time flies. You know, I spend a lot of time in the community. I always laugh when I hear elected officials say, "Oh, I represent the people," and I tell them, I say, well, you know, in the last 2 days, I've been with 15 different groups and organizations to hear what they are thinking, and that's why I take time out of my schedule to come to places like the Community Design Center, because it gives us the opportunity to actually hear from the broader community and not just be in an echo chamber where you hear from a few people and think that you represent everybody. You have to, as an elected official, go out and talk to everyone. And this is why organizations like this are so very important. I want to just recognize some of my senior management team that is here with me. Rich Perrin, who is my Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Services. Rich, if you can just raise your hand. John Brock, who's Special Assistant to the Mayor, as well as Lily Ruiz, if you can just wave your hand. And then any of our City of Rochester staff that's here, raise your hand. I just want to show you, we care about this organization, as you can see. And just let me also recognize 2 elected officials who have been strong partners with me for a long time. Again, people who are in the community doing the work. President Miguel Melendez from Rochester City Council is here. Miguel. And also District 22 Representative Mercedes Vasquez-Simmons. Thank you also for being here, Mercedes. I will be brief in my remarks. I spoke at a graduation today earlier this morning, and I was reminded of a story that I heard. My first graduation, I spent many years on the school board. So my first graduation, I got elected to the school board young. I was like 23 years old. And it was a 6th grade graduation. I had spent my time practicing. I called my mother on the phone, and I'm practicing this graduation speech. And I went to the 6th grader. I can't remember what his name was. And I went to this kid. He's probably a grown man now, because this would have been over 20 years ago. And I said, listen, I'm getting ready to give this speech. What do you want me to talk about? He looked at me, and he said, mister, I don't care what you talk about. My mother is going to get us ice cream after this, so just hurry up and get it on. So I will do that today, because I see the plates getting ready to come out, lunch is coming, and it is a dangerous place for me to be standing between you and the fork on your plate. So I want to thank you all for having me here today. Karen, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for your leadership. Rochester's built environment was spurred by industry. We harnessed the power of the Genesee and the High Falls, and business flourished, attracting entrepreneurs, workers, shopkeepers, and every manner of citizen to create the city we have today. Infrastructure, often overlooked and underappreciated, plays a vital role in our daily lives, shaping the quality of our transportation systems, our water and sewage networks, and our public spaces. It's the backbone that supports our city and fosters economic growth. Rochester is renowned for its rich history, cultural diversity, and technological innovation, and we are in the middle of a reawakening. Downtown, and a lot of people don't know this, is currently our fastest growing neighborhood, and we work daily to address the needs of these new residents. And once again, the Genesee is spurring growth, but this time it benefits more than just industry. As we reclaim this vital river for its beauty, we draw in residents and visitors alike. We're awed by the power of the 96-foot waterfall in the heart of downtown, the power that once was used to turn a wheel in a factory now is the power that is sparking residents' imagination. With this reawakening, we must reinvest in our infrastructure to meet the evolving needs of our residents and businesses and correct some of the wrongs that were built into our environment. The success of the Interloop East project is no secret. We are recognized across the nation for the work we have done there. Converting a sunken section of the expressway to the east of downtown to complete an at-grade street, including dedicated bicycle and pedestrian facilities, was a complex task, but was crucial to reconnecting the city and its residents. The project created 6 acres for the redevelopment. Creating new land in a city is impossible, but that is precisely what we did. It was Will Rogers that said, buy land, they're not building any more of it. We turned that on its head. Not only did we create 6 new acres there, but we are also going to create over 25 more acres when we embark on Interloop North. With the opportunity to build it from the ground up, we started with a high-quality, complete street. We enhanced the area's livability, and now people walk and bicycle easily between neighborhoods in downtown. In addition to providing clear livability benefits, the land surrounding the loop has been transformed into a mixed-use community that provides Rochesterians and visitors with places to work, live, and play. As of early this year, more than 500 housing units had been developed in the Interloop area. More than 60% of these units are for residents earning less than the area median income. We had the opportunity to build the city that we wanted, and we did. And as I said, next up is Interloop North transformation, where we will reconnect downtown with even more neighborhoods, the public market in High Falls. We're building a better transportation network to meet the needs of all users, creating new green spaces and fostering opportunities for equitable economic and community development. With Rochester's Rock the Riverway program and the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, the vision for the true transformation of Rochester's downtown and neighborhoods are coming to fruition. As we strive for a greener, climate change is real, more sustainable future, robust and reliable public transportation systems, they are absolutely essential. We must prioritize public transit as a viable and attractive option for all residents to reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. I still have smoke in my lungs from 2 weeks ago from that Canadian fire that we had here, felt the effects here in Rochester. To this end, we begin working with community advisors on the Rochester Active Transportation Plan to make our streets safer and more accessible for people who walk, ride bikes, or take public transportation. Our Active Transportation Project centers on equity by engaging and uplifting the voices of people who live and work in our most underrepresented communities. The plan will be completed this summer and will serve as our roadmap to creating a safer and more just transportation network. Beyond transportation, our public spaces also demand attention. We recently increased funding for our city parks, so they are not simply green spaces, but places of refuge for residents. Parks and green spaces are the lifeblood of any city, offering a place for leisure, activity, and social interactions. That's why you saw in this last budget that was passed last night, thank you, Council President Melendez, the highest amount of funding for parks ever in the city's history. By investing in improving and expanding our public spaces, we create vibrant and inclusive communities, fostering a sense of pride among residents and attracting visitors to experience the beauty of our city. And what adds to that beauty of the city more than trees? You've heard me say I want to be called the Johnny Appleseed of mayors. I've earned that title by starting the City of Rochester's tree expansion and beautification program to increase the number of city trees from 64,000 to 70,000 by 2025. 1,000 trees were planted this spring, and another 1,000 will be planted this fall. And those trees will be equitably planted across the city's 4 quadrants to ensure that everyone shares in the many benefits the trees provide. Our teams in neighborhood and business development, the Department of Environmental Services, our Department of Recreation and Human Services, and many others are out there working every day to make our city more attractive and healthy and a great place to live. I'm proud of the work that our city staff is doing and of all the people in the community who are dedicated to this mission, including all of you that are in this room. I'm excited about the progress we are making and what this city will look and feel like into the very near future. Partnerships are crucial as we build a city for today and 100 years from now. I look forward to continuing our collaborations as we devise sustainable and forward-thinking solutions. Together, we can rise to the challenge and ensure that Rochester's bridges stand strong and its roads and trails pave the way for progress for every resident. By investing in our infrastructure, we lay the foundation for a thriving, prosperous future filled with hope. And I'm happy to announce that Rochester has been selected for 2 key programs on the national level that are extremely competitive: the Mayor's Institute for Pedestrian Safety and also the Mayor's Institute for Civic Design, which we are proud and honored to be a part of. And that is what collaboration is really all about. So I will get out of the way because you have a great speaker and a great expert from the second best city in the country after Rochester, Dr. Frank, who's here. And also just let me say a shout out to another member of my senior management team that I missed. I saw Kevin Kelly, he's the city planner. So we gotta say, Kevin, thank you for being here as well. But again, I wish you all a happy and great summer. I look forward to hearing from Dr. Frank from UC San Diego. And again, I want to thank you for inviting me here, and I look forward to the partnership that we will continue with this great organization, and here's to another 20 years. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor Evans. Keep up the great work. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to a renowned expert and esteemed individual and my friend, Dr. Lawrence Frank. Dr. Frank is a distinguished scholar, researcher, and thought leader in the field of urban planning and public health. He first addressed our group in 2010. Dr. Frank is the president of Urban Design for Health, a local Rochester firm, and a professor at the University of California, San Diego. He has been listed in Thomson & Reuter's top 1% in the social sciences and was recently ranked the #1 top planning academic in North America, according to Google Scholar. As an accomplished author, speaker, and consultant, Dr. Frank has shared his insights and findings with audiences worldwide. His ability to bridge the gap between research and practical application has made him a sought-after expert and a trusted advisor to policymakers, city officials, and public health professionals. Furthermore, and perhaps more importantly, Dr. Frank is a Rochester native who grew up on Kimberly Drive in Brighton, just one house down from me and my family, where walking 1 block down to Council Rock School was an everyday neighborhood occurrence. Who would have guessed that more than 50 years later, both of us would discover that we have dedicated our professional careers to similar pursuits? Please join me in giving a warm and enthusiastic welcome to Dr. Lawrence Frank.
One house away. It is wonderful to be here and to be back in Rochester, obviously my hometown, born here, and I'm deeply honored. 13 years went pretty fast, actually. Hard to believe, as the mayor said in his comments, time goes quick. Rochester is quickly changing with that time, and I think for the better. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First, thank you, Karen and the Design Center, for bringing me here. This is a bit of sense of completion. For over a third of a century now, I've been studying the effect of the way communities are designed on travel behavior and health. And I feel like maybe I'll continue to do it for a good while longer, but I guess if there was a point in time when I felt like I could just retire, this would be one of them. I don't know why that came up. At the end of my talk, I'll mention my parents were very deeply rooted in the community. Irwin and Marilyn Frank, really devoted to this community. And I think maybe when I went into urban planning, and when I started studying public health, they were like, what are you doing here? This kind of came in through the back door. Planners never were thinking much about health historically, except at the very beginning, 150 years ago. But I wanted to say also at the outset, our city, our community, I still feel like I am of here and run a business here with my colleague Jim Chapman, who's here today, Urban Design for Health, is that Rochester has an incredible asset base. The built and natural environment here is incredible. You have tremendous assets to work with, and you are doing good work leveraging those assets. And the way the world has changed around the effects of the environment on our wellness and our health makes Rochester very well positioned. As you look around where the disasters are happening globally, things that are happening, this is going to be more and more a place where people return to. First, we shape our environment, then it shapes us. Churchill said that, and I'm stealing it. There's a growing body, and actually, I don't know if he was the first to say it. I think maybe Benjamin Disraeli said it. But a growing body of evidence. Now, we're way into this topic now. There's a huge amount of evidence that has been mounting on the relationships between and impacts of the built and natural environment and obesity and chronic disease. This evidence has gained the attention of World Health Organization and other internationally recognized organizations. And the population level burden of chronic disease in the US alone is estimated in the trillions. It's so incredibly large. It's undermining our entire economy at this point. Our car-dependent culture that we so adore and are dependent upon is literally killing us. And that's a fact. We've been able to measure that for a long time. So there is no doubt, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to use cars, but the degree to which we rely solely on the car to do everything, that point in time is really coming to an end for us. It's really hard pill to swallow, so to speak, but the reality is that unless we do reduce our degree of car dependence, climate change and health, our health and the health of our planet are at risk. But these features of the built environment, the good news is, are quite modifiable. The inner loop that was built here was an over-exaggeration of the belief that wherever you built a road, you got a benefit. Regions built circumferential 490s, most regions in our country, got interstate funds, and they built the ring road around. Fine. Few actually built the inner loop, and I kind of think of it a bit as a bit of a noose around the downtown, which you're finally removing, which is great. So you're going to get a lot of benefits, and we've been modeling. I'll present a little bit on that. So a little bit on the science, and I know you're eating lunch, so I'll try not to be too academic about this, but let's see if, so on the left, and I'm not sure how to make this work. Let's see if I can. So these are the things that planners and what you get to shape through the design and building of communities. Transportation infrastructure, the land use decisions, the density, the mixing of uses, pedestrian environment? Is there sidewalks? Are there trees? Or is there street furniture? Are there good crossings? And then is there green space? Those 4 buckets are the things you just mentioned that yesterday City Council passed the biggest funding for green space. Those are the features, those are the levers, those are the mechanisms that you get to make decisions on where and how to invest in and how much. That then affects our behaviors and our exposures. So this is the study design. This is how the research is done. So we relate those factors with people's behaviors, how active they are, what they eat, do they interact socially in relation to the physical environment where they live, how much air pollution do they breathe, are they exposed to injury risk from traffic and crime and noise, behaviors and exposures. Those interact through time and space, and we as creatures, living creatures, have biological responses, telling you many things you already know, but this is the whole thing in a nutshell. That affects our weight, body mass index on top. Inflammation and stress all interact with each other to then affect physical and mental health outcomes. And there are many. Those are chronic outcomes: hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer. There's many experts in the room from the University of Rochester who know a lot about these things. These are components of the overall bigger picture. And out of the back end of all that is healthcare utilization and cost. So that's the whole story right there. And this is sort of the research program I've been working on my whole career, and many others as well. And the good news is that we collectively, as a field in these sciences, integrating health and planning and anthropology and other fields collectively, are really learning a lot together. Very positive. The response by government is a call to action. The federal government's initiative to support environmental justice. When Biden became president, 40% of investments are supposed to be targeted into underserved communities. Surgeon General had a call to action called Step It Up in 2015. There was enough evidence then. We're not lacking evidence at this point. These are 2 sides of the same coin. So the reducing GHG carbon from travel is critical, and climate change and health are 2 sides of the same coin indeed. And it's all about energy. This is really kind of the way to bring health and climate change together, is the fact that when each of us every day spend a certain amount of energy getting around. The degree to which that energy is human-powered gives us a health benefit and doesn't impact the environment adversely. The degree to which it's sedentary and carbon-based gives us actually adverse. When we're sedentary, we're actually harming, that's not good for our health as much, for sure. So I'll confess, in 2004, I published a study called, that became known as driving, basically time spent in cars causes obesity. And measured that. Every hour in a car is a 6% increase in the likelihood of obesity. That went around the world. That was kind of a novel finding. And the way I came home for my high school reunion to Rochester, and I remember everybody teasing me, going, "You got paid to do that? I could have told you that." So anyways, that was what I presented here 13 years ago. So we've learned a lot since then. And now we have incredible infrastructure funding at the federal level that Rochester is poised to and already starting to take advantage of, as you heard from the mayor. Rochester's super well positioned. The inner loop is bang on with the Safe Streets funding. There's an incredible amount of resources at the federal level to incentivize places like Rochester, and you are well equipped and you have a lot of very trained and innovative leadership in that area. So this region stands to do very well and will look very different 5 to 10 years from now because of that. So the pandemic had a huge effect on us, as we know, in many ways. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But what it did was it made people more amenable. We tend to think that the way we build communities and the way things have been done can't change. It's an inherent part of our nature as species, but that's just the opposite of reality. We change all the time. We adapt incredibly well. That's why there's so many of us. So reappropriating road space, we're now seeing, willingness of communities that formerly would be no way would we ever allow people to take a lane of traffic in our neighborhood. Converted from that to demanding it, wanting to have streets made safe for walking. So there's an openness now and a lot of transformation, a lot of innovation happening. I'm showing you, this is a normal street promenade. Mayor mentioned that I now live in San Diego. This is an example where we're doing before and after studies. So that's where the science is now, is that researchers like myself like to do a baseline, survey people before something happens, have the thing happen, the innovation, the intervention, take the inner loop out, and then actually quantify the effect that it had. We need that evidence to prove and understand what worked and what didn't. But what we've learned, and we've done a few of these, it works. It definitely, the intuitive things that we think are measurable. So there's a lot of opportunity to build on and learn what's most effective and where the most effective interventions are, where the most return on investment. So now into a little bit about, well, what defines the built environment? What are the elements and what is the scale? There are 3 levels. Regional mobility, accessibility is critical. Transit, good transit service and access to get around is really important. Not everybody can use transit, and not everybody will use it for and few people will use it for everything. But if you make it convenient and comfortable and safe, a certain proportion of the population will, and that's our job, is to make that happen. So regional mobility is critical. Complete communities, the live, work, play, having what's now called a 15-minute neighborhood, that everything you can get to is within walking distance in 15 minutes, destinations, connected streets, density, all of that. But we also have another layer down, which is this, the pedestrian environment, and I mentioned that earlier. So this is critical. Systematically, communities that are underserved lack infrastructure to support safe pedestrian movement. That's why the incident rates, the crime rate, and also crime, lack of ability to move around is so prevalent, because these communities that are underserved, they lack safe sidewalks, street crossings, all of that. And we've been measuring that, and now we actually have been developing, using artificial intelligence, the ability to read digital images. How many are familiar with Google Street View? Everybody is, right? So all the digital images, we now can read those automatically and literally extract features. What's there now? We can do that automatically. So that's what Urban Design for Health is doing with our software tool that I'll talk about a little bit. But that's critical, because those are the most cost-effective, easily modifiable features that we can actually build on. And when we link that with the demographics, what we find is that the most underserved communities have the highest concentrations of chronic disease, the least infrastructure to support safe and active travel, and that's where the most cost benefit will come from. So when we measure and do research, and there's some GIS experts, many GIS experts in the room, we like to know where people are. Like, the biggest question we have is, do you know where people are located, the actual physical location where they live and where they go? Because that'll determine their exposure to what environments they went to the environments they went to. So that's how we measure. We put a person, this is an observation-specific buffer. That red dot is where somebody lives, and that squiggly greenish beige area, olive-colored, is actually what they can get to within a kilometer of their home. When we measure that, and we do this with thousands of people, we compare the environment. This is kind of what we call a continuum, or even a transect, quoting Andreas Duani with Congress for the New Urbanism. But on the left, we have exurban, very low density, sprawling development. As you move to the right, and this is a way to communicate, so this is how the research is done, is we compare people who live in different environments. We have large surveys, tens of thousands of people, participants. We know all about them, their travel behavior, their health characteristics, and we know where they live. And we've been measuring and doing this for years, and so have many other people. This is what the evidence is based on. So you can see in exurban, there's aerial images, and then a street view using Google Street View, in fact, and these are from Vancouver. British Columbia, and on the right is the most compact and walkable. The good news is you really don't need to be all the way to the right to get the health benefit. You can kind of be in levels somewhat walkable in the middle or moderately walkable, and you get very significant benefits from that, and actually can match up with what most people actually like in a community. For example, this is research we did on diabetes. Compared to people in the most car-dependent environments, those in the most walkable, or moderately walkable, were 27% and 39% less likely to develop type 2 diabetes. That's a huge difference in relative risk. Comparably, and then on the mental health side, sense of community, compared to those in the most car-dependent environments, those in moderate to very walkable communities were 24% and 47% more likely to actually have a better sense of community and belonging in their neighborhood. So these are intuitive findings, but it's actually quite measurable. All right, on to an intervention, just to show an example. This is in Vancouver. So I was a professor. I had the Bombardier Chair in Sustainable Transportation in Vancouver, University of British Columbia, for 20 years. So when I felt like when the mayor was talking about the fire, I was thinking blame Canada. I don't ever remember being in Rochester when a fire came, when smoke came here from Canada. But anyways, I was in Canada. We have really bad air pollution from fires there. So they took a street downtown. The city approached me and said, hey, we're going to take this street. We're going to turn it into a pedestrian thoroughfare. And we want you to measure the effect of taking it away from being a car-oriented road and make it a greenway for bikes and pedestrians. So this is our sample. We collected 524 households worth of data. The red dots are people along the corridor, and the beige dots are people that are located, So these are our controls. They did not get the greenways here. So within a half a kilometer or a quarter of a mile, we called that an intervention. This is like a randomized control trial where it's like, some people get a drug and some don't. Instead of a drug, they got a greenway. And that's the research now. That's what we do. And that's the comparative. So they're comparable in every way to each other, except they didn't get a greenway, not a pill. So that's what we're testing. And so here you can see what we learned. This is before. It's beautiful. So it was already very walkable, but the roadway, right-of-way, was dedicated for cars, not pedestrian. Afterwards, they shifted the right-of-way, reappropriated the road space to active modes. We found that people within 300 meters, or the red dots, they reduced their driving by 21% in GHG emissions. They were twice as likely to get the amount of physical activity that they needed and recommended, and they were 5-fold more likely to bike. Huge findings. So leading us back to that original diagram and thinking about, so during the pandemic, what we learned was chronic disease predisposes people, at least we learned during the pandemic, if somebody had a chronic disease and they got COVID, they got a lot sicker. That was a really big issue. So one pandemic led to another in the sense of not necessarily whether or not you got COVID, but if you got COVID, the severity of how sick, and we all saw that. And many of us may have suffered from people who did not fare very well through that process. So this is very important that the two pandemics are very related. So it all comes back to what's on the left. The transportation, land use, pedestrian, environment, green space, the decisions we make affected everything, and it's still that way. So I'm just going to mention NACTO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, have been cataloging all the different strategies. Your city planning department here is very up to speed, county planning, and others in the region. You have many experts. Many of you are experts on this. So been a lot of innovation, and some of these have been tested. Other things that happened during the pandemic is this working at home changed the dynamic of urban planning very much, and obviously workforce development. And it changed the nature of residential location. Many of us can live much further from where we worked. That's a real conundrum for, I wrote Urban Sprawl and Public Health, the book with Centers for Disease Control. So we know that's a sprawl enabler. There's no doubt about it. But there are many other things that came from the pandemic that might make urban areas better. So I want to turn to green space a little bit. The city council and the mayors made a commitment to planting, I think, 6,000 trees to start with. This is great. So a little bit of research on this. We did a study in Sacramento published called Green Prescription, came out in Health and Place about 6 or 7 years ago. And we learned about exposure to nature and green space to encourage physical activity, reduce stress, promote restoration, and improve air quality. A little bit on this. So based on a theoretical framework that we all know, most of us, called biophilia, humans have an instinctive affiliation for and need for connection with the natural world. E.O. Wilson from Georgia, from Ecology. Green prescription used a lot of existing data, spatially joined it using those buffers that I showed. So we matched people's location with the amount of tree canopy that they have, data that Rochester has as well. High resolution data on tree canopy, how much coverage is there. And we also included walkability, which I talked about earlier, because both of them affect the outcomes, which are physical activity and wellness. And then we came up with these results. We found that neighborhood tree canopy was associated for adults with less obesity and overweight status, lower psychological stress, more vigorous physical activity, less asthma, better general health, and better social cohesion. In teens, some of the same, I think many of the same results, and also fewer depressive symptoms. And in children, some of the same outcomes, as you can see. So green prescription implications for decision makers are many. Trees provide obviously shade, aesthetic appeal, and relief from extreme heat. Now that is the thing that we're most concerned about, is extreme heat. And we do know the systematic nature is that more disadvantaged communities have consistently less tree canopy, and you're well aware of that. We learned actually a 10% increase in tree canopy was associated with an 18% reduction in the likelihood of obesity. So the Sacramento Tree Foundation loved that finding. Of course, we know that trees don't make you thin. It's not a causal relationship, but there's a lot of other factors that go into that that made that finding useful. So the City of Rochester's Urban Reforestation Initiative, as mentioned by the mayor, as I mentioned, has been moved forward by the mayor, working to reforest urban neighborhoods in each of the city's 4 quadrants and overcome decades of disinvestment along with environmental and racial injustice in recognition of the health and benefits and needs for tree canopy. And Urban Design for Health is going to be helping in this. Rich Parents here, and we're going to work with the city to help provide some evidence to document the benefits of that and actually bring some of the existing literature into this process. So I'm going to just wrap up a little bit by talking about all this evidence is fine, but it doesn't really have legs unless you make a tool in a way that it can be directly applied when decisions are being made in the context of health impact assessment processes. So the National Public Health Assessment Model is a tool that we build. It was funded by the federal government. EPA has been funding us for 12 years, and we've got this tool pretty developed. It's been used in 12 regions. Rochester's the orange dot. Across the country, we're getting more and more uptake. It's the only tool of its kind. And it brings together a tremendous amount of data that we've been building for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation through other projects that we build for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation with their culture of health. We build the metrics that are in their report card, and we also build the smart location database for the US EPA, which is the metrics that are used across the country on the built environment. EPA has its own natural environment metrics. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about this tool and then wrap up. NFAM application process is basically a little too technical. I'll just mention there's a lot of factors that go into it. Demographics, built environment metrics. We put all this together. We have statistical models that predict all of these outcomes, and we output results in terms of, what were the outcomes and distribution, where was diabetes the greatest, or obesity, or heart disease, and we are able to project that for the whole country at the census block group level. Lots of different data is used for it. You can ask me more later if you're interested. And I'm just going to, the data set that we built it on is the California Health Interview Survey data. California has a tremendous variety of urban environments. Many of them are similar to what Rochester has, and many of them aren't. So we're able to pick the parts of California that are similar to Rochester and generalize from that. And then we externally validate the results with local data. I'm going to just jump ahead. This is an example of Chicago, a map showing in this case, estimated annual health costs. So we monetize the health impacts through the tool, and we can test scenarios for future growth and see what the outcomes would be. But most interesting for you is that we did it on the inner loop. So this was funded by GTC. The city of Rochester has not reviewed these results, so the planning staff are completely off the hook in terms of being responsible for it. This is totally my fault. We were funded by Genesee Transportation Council to take the tool and build it so that it's ready to be used in Rochester on things like the inner loop. So we've done that, and it's ready to be used on, it could be Fairport, Town Center. It's best at a community level, not something you would run on an individual parcel of land, but a scenario of downtown redevelopment, could be a corridor, could be the whole region. That's what we do around the country a lot. So anyways, health analysis. So we looked at current conditions, and 3 scenarios were tested in the inner loop. Here are 3 different scenarios, basically conservative, moderate, and aggressive, and then of course current condition. And we changed the population and employment projections, how much growth is going to come in terms of households and jobs, and then looked at the effect of adding the green space and household income assumed increase modestly, and land use diversity increasing, bringing destinations into the corridor, and basically sewing the community back together that was severed when that went in. There probably can be, knowing about and seeing a lot of interventions, few interventions are likely to perform as well as the removal of an intervention that went in that severed an existing downtown of a major city. I mean, it has every single component of what the tool is designed to test. It increases the connectivity of the network. It does everything. So here's the inner loop scenario. This is the modest, conservative, moderate, and I just went through this, but here's the results. Okay, so percentage of adults on the left so the blue bar is the existing conditions, and then the orange is conservative, moderate is gray, and aggressive is yellow. And you can just see a steady drop off in people that are overweight and then obese. This shows diabetes following a similar pattern as you would expect. On the left is type 2 diabetes, on the right is estimated hypertension. So you're comparing to baseline, which is current condition, and then you're seeing the 3 different scenarios. The 3 different scenarios aren't that different from each other in how well they perform, but there's no question that the intervention should very much have a positive effect on people's health. Coronary heart disease prevalence, and then depression on the right for that, and then just a summary. And this is available, and we actually have a report we can share with you. We did this some time ago. This is preliminary. We have now taken the models and tool, and we've built more aggressive predictive models that are able to be more accurate. But in general, these are the outcomes. I won't read them all in the interest of time, but just other things to consider is I can't read the. As we increase population and employment in the inner loop, we see benefits to key sustainability beyond the health metrics across all scenarios. The more growth that occurs, the better the scenarios perform. This shows that the inner loop north is a logical place to encourage infill development. Of course, you're going to get developable land out of it, and that's going to be very helpful. But in the process, reconnect the community in many places. So San Diego, we've run software tool there long ago. They had a train station near the Mexican border. This is the map. This shows down near the Mexican border is a transit station, and they had a plan to increase development and invest there. We modeled that and showed these benefits: 68% increase in walking, 15% reduction in high blood pressure, and about a 10% reduction in type 2 diabetes from their own aspiration-based plan to create a walkable community around a train station. A little bit more results there. And then Las Vegas, I mentioned GTC here in Rochester. We've been working in Stockton, California. Lots of scenarios, and what we're doing now is summarizing these case studies and building a culture users who are actually using the tool and getting them to learn from each other. So this is a brand new field. There's very few tools like this. In fact, this is the only scenario planning tool that is like this one, where actually you can do what ifs in this way. We brought health into scenario planning. The Genesee Transportation Council has a lot of expertise and interest in this. and hopefully others will hear as well. I think I'm just going to jump ahead. In Las Vegas, we tested bus rapid transit and showed an incredible health benefit of bringing better quality transit service to that region. And I think the details probably better to just say, if you're interested, I can tell you more about that. But bus rapid transit is a very cost-effective strategy, and to get transit to be faster, more efficient, without having to build rail lines, actually running transit right on existing right-of-way. And that's being done around the world, and is super cost-effective and quite effective from a mobility, social justice, air pollution reduction from travel and health perspective. So last, I wanted to kind of, and wrapping up is the money part, the economics of this. Los Angeles passed a bond years ago, 3 years ago, to maybe 4 now, for about $170 billion in locally based funding to build transit and active transportation, with some funding going to roads as well, but mostly that. So this just showed their baseline, and this is what would happen. Their trend was all in the expected direction. Building that plan had all these benefits in terms of increases in active transportation that have a health benefit, and then these reductions and they're fairly modest, but these reductions in health chronic outcomes. And then you see in one community, we just picked Glendale because it actually, it varies across the surface of a region. As time goes on, we get older, and age, not everywhere can improve, and not everybody's health will get better. There are pockets of regions it's difficult, but the reality is that we show some places perform better than others across the surface of a 20 million person region. So we picked Glendale just to show some example where they actually got a train station. So what we build, back to kind of, this is in summary, the investments we make in transportation and land use affect travel behavior, health, and cost. And these are the outcomes that we can monetize. So capital construction and maintenance, equipment and services, tourism, healthcare. Most importantly, and kind of the biggest surprise for us, was healthier, the absenteeism goes down in a healthier workforce when people are more physically active, and the return on investment not only comes from reducing healthcare costs, but from monetizing the healthcare, the workforce productivity. In Los Angeles, we learned, and we hired AECOM, a very large engineering firm that run this model for regional planning organizations around the world, an $8.41 payback for every buck spent on active transportation, and that did not even take into account elderly, which is going to be where most of the costs are. The amount of basically externalized benefit that comes from active transportation infrastructure is massive, and we only are starting to even understand the scale of it. So with that, I'll just say that there's obviously more to do. The pedestrian environment part, I think I mentioned that earlier. We can tell you more about urban design for health, but I wanted to conclude and make one final dedication, which is my parents. My mother ran the National Kidney Foundation, and anybody remember touch-a-thons? Yeah. That was my mom, that was her. Who can stand there the longest gets a car. It was pretty fun. I remember where she got the idea from. So I want to dedicate this talk to her and my father. She also founded Friends of Strong, which became, I think, is still in active. Yep. And my father ran the university. He was medical director for U of R for like 15 years, and a urologist here and a professor. So they devoted their lives and careers to making Rochester a better and healthier place to live. So it's an honor to be here, and thank you. Do you want to use this? Here, I can have this chair.
Are you willing to take some questions? Sure. We have time for some questions. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Frank? Yes? I'll come out with the mic. Raise your hand, please. Oh, coming at you.
Hey, thank you. Just want to say incredible presentation. I really appreciate all the work that you put into it, and the tool's really impressive. My question was around how, if at all, does it take into account displacement that sometimes happens in neighborhoods when there's investment, and are the people that lived there before the same ones that are there with the health benefits?
Thank you for that very thoughtful and obviously the most challenging question possible. Next question, please. I think yesterday I met with Hinge partners, and we talked about some strategies that really might work. This has been the conundrum of decades. This is not a new issue. In fact, I was sitting in a room a few months ago with planning directors on the West Coast. John Ram, who's from San Francisco, made the comment that people who live in the Mission District don't want the removal of the last piece of the viaduct. When 880 came down in the earthquake, there's a piece left, and they actually don't want to get rid of it because they're afraid they'll get displaced and will have to move. That's how much this is an issue. So in Rochester, it's not gotten quite that bad yet. Maybe it has, but or maybe it's close. But in already highly appreciated real estate markets, it's extreme. I went to a meeting in Seattle where they were like, we love this walkability stuff, we want to do it, but neighbors won't even let us do it anymore because we're afraid they're going to have to move. So that's how much we can't talk about walkability without talking about social justice. The fact is that more fortunate people who are in walkable environments get all the good stuff. They get the shops and the services and the green space, maybe transit as well that's easy to use, higher quality. Poor people with walkability get air pollution, noise, injury risk from travel, and that all does, and so it doesn't perform on the health side. So it's a critical thing as a preface. So what I liked, what we were talking about yesterday, Hinge group mentioned and partners, is, and today we saw an announcement from USDOT, is that the funding that goes into the communities to improve themselves can be used to train the workforce and residents that live there to do those improvements and actually increase their own quality of life. Now, that is a mechanism to respond to a possible solution. But that gentrification as a definition is not necessarily about, does gentrification embody displacement in the term? And I think it probably does. So if displacement is resolved or could partially be resolved by bettering the people that live there to improve themselves, that seems like it could have resonance. There have been other strategies used as well. Albuquerque tried, and many places around the country have tried different strategies with different degrees of success. Personally, I like the idea of using, in regions that are perhaps a little bit more congested, pricing transportation system to fund affordable housing in disadvantaged communities. Now that makes, that's something that would, but I don't know that the congestion pricing is on Rochester's radar, so that's not going to be the solution here. Each region will have its own set of strategies it can use and leverage, but you are going to get, no doubt, when the inner loop and the freeway goes out, the land value goes up. That's an invariable fact. So the ability for people who live there to benefit from that lift can be accomplished in many ways, and you have some very talented planners and staff here in the city. I mean, there's all local improvement districts, there's redistribution mechanisms through tax benefit areas. There are many ways that can happen, so I hope that was at least some thoughts. I really think this workforce, training the workforce that live there, permanently training and creating skills in that community, and USDOT has an announcement on that right now for funding to help that happen.
I have a hot mic here. Anyone else have a question? Please raise your hand. Me. Maybe I'll come over.
Good afternoon. My question is in alignment with Councilperson Lupien's. When the inner loop was first created, and you used the analogy of a noose, when the inner loop was created to be a moat to separate Black and brown communities after around the uprising, it displaced tons of black and brown families. There was never any reparations truly for the communities that were broken up. When Interloop, what is it, South, where it is now, was put back in, that the people who had been around there could not move back in. How do I believe what you say when I see what you do? And I'm not talking to you as an individual, I'm talking to planners. Because if me as a resident of Rochester who lives in one of the zip codes not called the Crescent, you know, because when you say that, well, we'll give these people skills, it makes the assumption that there are not skills already in that community. It makes the assumption that people don't have, and the reason that they don't have is by some individual thing of their own, and I'm getting to my question. There's some individual fault of their own and not about systemic and institutional racism that has happened in this community for generations. So my question to you is, have planners looked at reparations as part of the conversation for the serial displacement that happens and has happened for the urban renewal that you speak of? Because we say that not all gentrification is bad. I live in Beechwood. I have owned my home for over 23 years. I have watched my neighbors who rent getting priced out already. I've watched people who could buy can't buy. Now, we do not have the concentration of the Bay Area, but we have an equal housing crisis commensurate with our population. So my question to you again is, have planners, A, looked at reparations in a way during planning, you included, because you're an academic, this is what you study, and also what would you recommend to make sure, instead of us just saying social justice, that we do this in a way that does not displace entire communities, i.e. things like Cornhill?
Thank you for your question.
And by the way, don't use lynched when you talk about a black community in the same week as Juneteenth. When he used lynch to discuss, when he used a noose as an analogy to the interlude, families were displaced. They had their lives taken from up under them to build a moat, to make sure that the dominant culture felt safe.
Thank you for.
What I'm saying, I don't have to wait, let me finish. So, because somebody asked me what she means, so I'm going to make sure you don't know that everybody understands. So, when you're using that analogy, please be aware that for me, for the people at that table, and for some other people in the room, I know this because I know who these people are, that's troubling, because I know people who are displaced. I know churches that were displaced. I know communities that will never truly recompense for the protective shield that neighborhood, community, and village brought that's taken away every time planning happens.
Well, we are all in agreement that removal of the inner loop will have a lot of impacts, both socially, physically, and health-wise. When it went in, I think I was actually intending to be in complete agreement that it was a very profoundly troublesome decision to put it in, for me as well. So I share the perspective on it. There are some examples. I believe Highway 94 in Minneapolis, St. Paul, is being looked at as a corridor that had a similar effect on the local communities, and they're looking at reparation as part of that mitigation process. There are other examples. I think the intent of this legislation at the federal level is to address exactly the concerns you raise, and I also am not aware exactly all the decisions. I'm here for a brief period of time. Wasn't there for the decision. I think when that freeway went in, I was probably about 5 years before I was born. Maybe, I don't know, what year did the inner loop go in? I was born in '61, so yeah, I was just, personally not responsible for that decision, but I actually understand the importance of it and agree with the magnitude of the effect it had. we have opportunities to correct wrongs from the past and shouldn't, I think, it should look towards those opportunities to be as effective collectively as we can. And I think there's a very strong, earnest commitment for that to happen. Next question, please.
I just have a little bit of a response.
Please.
Hinge Neighbors is a group that has been involved with the residents on the north and the south of the inner loop between Union and North Street. And in that, we developed a model of what a plan could be for land use. And we talked about reparation. How was that going to affect us, not me so much as people we were working with. In that, they said we would like to have some sort of model or a monument that would actually talk about all the people that were displaced. We went to the city office directories and we tried to find the names and people who were displaced at that time and understand who they were and become more involved. We have a group that actually did some oral history so that we could remember that. What we talked about and what the neighbors were telling us is that they would like to have some sort of a reparation of smaller lots, and so that there would be more possibilities of smaller black and brown developers who would be able to be involved with actually building within when it's filled in. So there's a lot of talk about that. Did we solve all of them? No. We actually would love to have this conversation with you and continue that to say, how could we do that? And we only did a focused area. We have 2 members of that team that are here talking, that were very much involved with that. So, and excuse me.
Yeah, please.
Hello, everyone. My name's Nancy. First of all, we are determined to be a part of this planning process when they fill in the inner loop. I've been living in Rochester for over all my life, and I run a fairy grandparents program at the Lewis Street Center Y at Lewis Street, and it's a lot of elderly people that live in the neighborhood that have been there like forever, and their families have been there since their grandmother and their grandmother before that. And we saw the inner loop be built and pulled out our community apart. We lost a lot of homes, we lost a lot of businesses, and now we have these elderly people that do not get on buses, that do not walk anywhere, but don't have no place to go to buy their groceries. So yes, we are working with Hinge, and we are working with the city of Rochester, and we got our hands in there, and we're not gonna allow them to come again and just pick our neighborhood apart and decide to put up walls. You know, it's beautiful the way it looks in the neighborhood of University, but to us, if you're in our neighborhood and you look, it's another wall that they created. We already lost downtown. We have already lost our groceries, our schools. We don't have a community school there. In our neighborhood, there's hundreds of us, and we meet all the time. We enjoy each other's company. So far as there is no division, so far as when it comes down to your cultures, your families, your schools, your churches, we all work together. There's Italians, there's Puerto Ricans, there's African Americans, there's Indians. We have people from Nepal in our neighborhood, and we're all working together to create a better life for us in the city of Rochester.
And all along the city of Rochester, we've been talking with them, and this plan was included in the feasibility study that was submitted for what are the concepts. So the last concept was very much involved with this land, and then we took the land use to say, how do we do that? And the city now is going to look at and is writing like an RFP for land use to be done at the same time that the design is. So the neighborhood has made a big change in saying, do the land use at the same time that we're filling it in. So thank you, neighbors.
Thank you. We'll take one more question. Anyone? All right. I guess that's a wrap.
Can I make one?
Sorry?
when
Go ahead.
It is possible and probably would be reasonably easy to do is to track and really measure to ensure and monitor regularly displacement if it's happening. To be sure that that's not happening, but to be tracking that so that there's direct feedback and transparency around that issue. I think that might go very well, go over very well, yeah. Thank you. And what to do about it if it is.
Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Let's all give Dr. Frank a round of applause. It's been wonderful to have you here today. Enjoy the beautiful day. Today's the first, I think today's the equinox, so longest day of the year. Enjoy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.